This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of The Express. Gary Allen with you. A very happy Gary Allen, I might add to you. I didn't know how I was going to be tonight. Been a lot of stuff going on with me. But I just want to thank all of you for joining me here tonight and allowing me to share my guests with you. Without you, there's no reason to do this show. And Randy, I know you're out there listening as you do every week, and I thank you. And a lot of you. I'd love to hear from a lot of you if you just want to get in on the chat room and let us know what you think. Or you can go on over to my website, GaryAllenTalkShow.com, find out what my email address is, and you can always email me or Facebook me and let me know what you think of the show. I'll mention your name, et cetera, et cetera. That'll be fantastic. We've got a great show for you tonight. A gentleman who has become a fast friend of mine. He's been in show business forever and a day. His name is Geoffrey Mark. He is the writer for a number of books, but besides all of that, he is considered an encyclopedia of show business history. He was born in Brooklyn, New York, and raised all over the country. Jeff has spent his entire life in one part of a show business or another. He has appeared on Off-Broadway and in summer stock. He's a singer, a stand-up comedian in New York and nightclubs and cabarets as well as cruise ships. He's the proud recipient of the Emmy Award and a nomination for a Grammy Award. He has been a writer for many comedians around the country. He's also the author of a number of bestsellers, The Lucy Book, Ethel, Merman, and The Biggest Star on Broadway. His newest book is Ella, a biography of a legendary Ella Fitzgerald. Geoffrey was also a producer of Nigel, Come Back to Me, a CD with 17-piece big band, and directed Spirit of the King, an Elvis show in the Spa Casino in Palm Springs, which is a beautiful, beautiful place. And so with that said, I welcome Geoffrey Mark to The Express. Thank you so much, for coming on board. And I can't wait to get into this and to talk about your life and show business. And Jeff is going to be back after the first of the year a number of times as we discuss this book and some of the other projects that he's been involved in. As I said, this gentleman is literally an encyclopedia of show business knowledge. You mentioned the person, and bada bing, he knows everything about them. Jeff, welcome to The Express.
Well, we're running a little late, folks. Good night. Well, that was the longest introduction anyone's ever given me. I feel so honored. Thank you, Gary. Hello, friends.
Hello. And by the way, my little thing has gone away, at least temporarily, till the first of the year. So, and Jeff knows what I'm talking about. Jeff,
never talk about your little thing on the air. Not a good thing.
I got to tell you something. I was watching a special on PBS tonight, and it was about Betty White. Now, I don't know anybody in the world who doesn't like Betty White. And if you do, you need to have your head examined. She's one of the nicest ladies in the world. I did meet her once, very briefly, when I was in L.A., and she was such a delight. I met her through Ted Knight, who I got to know pretty well when I was out in Los Angeles, and what a great gentleman. But they were doing – you remember when she did – I remember everybody out there when she did Saturday Night Live, how she got on there because of Facebook. Well, they did one of those PBS radio show things with her. Now, everybody out there, you remember the Alec Baldwin bit with the sweaty balls. Everybody remembers that. Well, she did one where she was Betty selling her muffins on the show. And one of the girls on the show said, "Oh, Betty, do I get a taste of cherries in your muffins, in your muff?" And she goes, and it was just the way Betty did it, and it was funny. I almost fell off the bed. She goes, "Oh, dear, I haven't had a cherry in my muffin since 1925. I almost fell off the bed. I literally did. It was just so funny. Anyway.
That's the real Betty, though. Betty has a very sharp, saucy sense of humor.
Yes, she does.
And she's nothing like the part she played on the Golden Girls. She's very direct, does not suffer fools gladly, and tells quite a few bawdy tales. So that's the real Betty coming through.
Yeah. We're going to talk about this wonderful book about Ella Fitzgerald, her life and everything, but I want to talk about a few of the other books and things that you have written over the years. And speaking of Betty, I just want to get this out of the way because you and I think you and I talked about this, I'm not sure. But apparently on the Golden Girls, there was no love lost between her and oh my
B.
goodness,
Arthur.
B. Arthur. And I have never been able to find out what the problem was, except maybe B was a little too, didn't care for maybe that Betty got a lot of attention.
No, you don't know the answer because you haven't asked me. I'll tell you the answer.
Okay, what's the answer?
It's going to not disappoint. I think people will think I'm making up a story. Betty is a very private person.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that she was married to Alan Ludden, who was a wonderful man.
Great game show host.
And a wonderful game show host, intellect, actor, singer. He had a beautiful voice.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much that's all we know about her. Her autobiography and the books she's written about her life don't give a lot of specifics. They're fun, they're fluffy, but they're not deep. There's a deeper side to Betty's life. And you hear me hemming and hawing because I'm trying to decide, do I really want to do this on the air or not? Betty brought a clack of friends to the tapings early on at the Golden Girls. And this clack of friends sat together in the front and laughed hysterically at everything Betty did and didn't laugh at anything anybody else did. And B, after the third or fourth episode, pulled Betty aside and said, look, we don't care. I'm cleaning this up tremendously. We don't care that you're bringing a clack of friends to the show. That's great that you have a clack of friends. But could you either instruct your clack of friends to laugh at all of us equally because it's throwing off our timing, or could you have them sit in twos and threes around the audience so that it's even? You know, we can fix it with canned laughter if we have to.
Right.
That doesn't help our performances. Our timing, everybody else's comedy timing is getting thrown off. And then he told her to do something that's anatomically impossible. and after that, there is no love lost between them. Betty now claims it's all B's fault. That's not what I have been told by people who wrote and produced the show.
Well, all I know is everything I've ever heard about B. Arthur, which is not a lot, is, you know, that Marine Corps training that she had as a Marine kind of came crystal clear through. She was kind of a straight and narrow kind of a person, although, you know, she probably had her moments when she was in New York. But okay, I'm glad. Listen, I'm glad we got that out. You grew up all over the United States. Was your father or someone in your family in the military, or?
No, he was a bum. He couldn't hold a job, and he was an alcoholic and a drug addict and a pedophile and a beastophile. He was a lovely man. And like many people who live that kind of life, although my maternal grandparents were wonderful, bought us a house, gave us all the stability we needed, he did so many things that were wrong that he kept moving us away from wherever we were to not be found out. So Brooklyn is my home. Brooklyn is the home base. It's where my heart was. There's 7 years I spent in Baltimore, and except for 2 or 3 people that I got to meet in that time, it is better left forgotten. Baltimore may be the dullest place I've ever been in my entire life. I'm going back a half a century ago. Before.
Well, I can attest to it. I can attest to it. It's not the most exciting city in the world, and you know, because we've talked about it. My brother played for the Colts, so it's not. Yeah. It's not like it's an exciting place. And even my Uncle Tubby, who you knew, the comedian who was from there, it wasn't an exciting place. But growing up like that all over the country, did it give you a special perspective on life and why you eventually ended up going into show business in comparison to someone else who didn't get a chance to travel in their youth a lot?
What it did do, it's a wonderful question. No one has ever asked me that question except for Gary Allen. Good for you.
Well, there you go again, expecting me to ask those crazy questions.
Well, I have crazy answers.
Yeah.
I think what it did do is, Brooklyn, I'm going back half a century ago, kids. If we're talking about when I was a little boy,
Mm-hmm.
Brooklyn was a great place to grow up. I mean, easy public transportation, great food, 3 baseball teams, great television, movie theaters on every other block. It was a wonderful place to be back then. But you were surrounded only by people who were just like you. The Jews and Italians lived together, the Irish lived together, the blacks lived together, Latinos lived together, and you went through neighborhoods to get someplace else, but the melting pot that it was, each neighborhood to its own. So I grew up only with Italian immigrants and Eastern European Jewish immigrants, and that was my whole life. I think had I stayed there, I would have grown up talking like Fran Drescher and not knowing there was more to the United States than our little microcosm. Yeah. So it opened my eyes. My goodness gracious, there's a whole great big country here full of people of all kinds of cultures. Mm-hmm. And it exposed me to that so that I was more open to all kinds of people. But I would have been in show business no matter where I would have been. I knew from the time I was 2 years old that those people on TV, I had to be one of them. Mm-hmm. So nothing would have stopped me. Because believe me, lots of things in life tried to stop me, and they did not stop me.
Yeah. I didn't, as you and I talked about off the air, no secret that I talked to my guests before they come on the air. We're talking to Geoffrey Mark, who is the author of this wonderful book, which we will get to, the biography of the legendary Ella Fitzgerald. And by the way, it's a wonderful read, an easy read. It's full of beautiful pictures of celebrities that she was with and her life story. And for those of you that are not old enough to remember Ella Fitzgerald, if you loved Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, you would love Ella Fitzgerald, the queen, and I mean the queen of jazz and scat singing and all the wonderful celebrities that she ever performed with, and how she came up in some pretty hard times. And we're going to get on to that here in a second, little while. But I want to talk about Geoffrey and some of the other books that he wrote, the Lucy book on Ethel Merman, as well as some of the other things that he has done, which is a fabulous life as a stand-up. And I was a stand-up for about 2 minutes.
It's not an easy life. Gary, no. I think I'm the luckiest son of a gun on the planet. Yeah. I knew what I wanted to do from the time I was 2 years old. My terrible home life, because I was emancipated at 15, and it wasn't my choice. My parents had me taken to court and had me taken away so that they were no longer responsible for me. Interestingly, Ella was on her own at 15. The parallels between her life and mine, I didn't know about till I began researching the book. My attraction to her as a performer was a whole separate thing, but now I saw what it was about her that brought me to her. But I'm a lucky guy. I've gotten to know or socialize or work with almost all of my heroes. I've been awarded for my work. I've become somewhat of a celebrity, never a star, but a celebrity. And I get to do what I love, and I'm still doing it, and I'm over 50. And most people at my age in show business don't work anymore. There's no work for folks over 45, and I'm still going. So I'm very, very lucky, man, and just that I get to be on with someone like you and spend an hour and hopefully make our listeners laugh and make them cry and make them think a little bit. What's better than that?
Well, this is not how I wanted to be in life, but somehow in college, I started doing college radio, and I drifted away from this, went to L.A., was part of the Groundlings, et cetera, and that's where I should have gone, where in reality I should have continued on with my radio career, and who knows where I'd be today, still sitting in my living room doing a podcast. I mean, what more could you ask for? You say that you watch people on television, and you probably listened on the radio as well, because radio was still a very prominent part. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, before television, there was radio, and everything was there. Who were your heroes? Who were the people that when you looked at them, you said, hey, I want to be that person, or I want to do what they do? Who were they?
The broadcasters. People like my friend Steve Allen, who ended up being one of my mentors. How cool is that? To admire someone as a little kid and grow up and have them say to you, wow, you've got talent. Let me help you. So Steve Allen, Gary Moore, Hugh Downs, Bill Cullen, The people
The
who
greatest,
look,
the best. Bill Collin was every game show host that I ever talked to, including my good friend Wink Martindale. Bill Collin was the best game show host it ever was.
Peter Marshall, who is a dear friend of mine now.
Yeah.
The show To Tell the Truth, for some reason, and I know there's a brand new version of it now, 2 or 3 seasons into it now. Folks, that started back in 1956.
Yeah.
That's how long this game has been being played on television. Every decade has had a version of it for the last 7. It's a wonderful, wonderful premise. And the panel on the show, when I was watching it, was a wonderful comedy actor named Tom Poston, who became a friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Peggy Cass, Orson Bean, and the incredible Kitty Carlisle. And in my home, Kitty Carlisle was the queen. My grandmother thought that she was the essence of what a lady should be, because we knew Kitty was Jewish, but that she wasn't immigrant Jewish. Her family had money. She was taken to Europe. She was given education. She wasn't the tenements in New York. That was not her background. My grandmother adored her and used Miss Carlisle as a reference point for me, because both my grandmother and great-grandmother told me almost from day one, you're going to be famous, you're going to be in society, you better learn how to act. And my mother thought she was nuts. And my grandmother told her, you don't even know what's in your son. Someday he'll be in Kitty Carlisle's apartment laughing at you. And 46 years later, I was in Kitty Carlisle's apartment, both of us crying. My grandmother was gone. My book on Ethel Merman had just become a bestseller. I was in New York publicizing it. And Kitty's people called me and said, she can't get out of the house. Could you come over? Because it was a cold February day. Could you come over and bring a copy of the book? She wants to spend some time with you. And I cannot guarantee you that I didn't actually open my window and fly from my hotel suite to her place off of Fifth Avenue and enter her private elevator and go up there. And it was everything my grandmother had thought it would be for me and more. And I told Kitty, I said, you understand, all of us, the sacrifices we make to be successes in show business, however successful we become. I said, everything I've ever done, being here in this room with you, if this is all I had ever done, it was all worth it. My grandmother's premonition came true, and I didn't make it happen. It happened on its own. And that was probably more than awards, more than first books. That was the moment like, okay, this was all worth it. Somewhere she is watching and going, see, I told you. I'm the luckiest guy on the planet.
You mentioned Tom Poston, and he was married to my first crush when I was a young man.
I assume you don't mean his wife, Kay, but you mean Suzanne Plachette.
Oh, I love that woman. Oh, my God. She
was tremendously sexy.
Oh, God, yes.
Tremendously earthy. Like Betty, she knew all the words, and she knew how to use them. It was a wonderful thing. She and Tom had done a Broadway show together that was not a success. And when her husband, Tommy, died, and Tom's wife, Kay, died, they died within days or weeks of one another. And literally, they bumped into each other at the funerals. And they started to date. And when they got married, the wedding announcement was the playbill of the original. And you open, and there they are in almost the same pose. And it says, the revival is better than the original. And if you didn't get invited to the wedding, that was the announcement you received. I have it somewhere in a box here in my house.
I thought she was, oh, God, she made my heart beat 100 times faster than it ever would.
You know what? Mine, too. There was something about her. She gave off a pheromone, I guess. And it wasn't just men, and it wasn't just straight men. Straight men wanted to be with her. Gay men wanted to be with her and admired her. Women admired her. There was just no nonsense about her femininity or her womanhood. She was who she was. She did what she did. She was confident in it, and yet terribly feminine while she was doing it. Not unlike Lucille Ball. And Susie was very, very good to me. and very thoughtful. I appreciated her personally very much. And again, I got to be her friend, the luckiest guy on the planet.
I was so sad when I heard that Tom had passed away. And then I think it was a very short period of time after Tom passed away, maybe within a year, that she died as well. And I thought, well, whatever. But I'll always remember that final episode of the Newhart show, not when he was the innkeeper, but when he was the psychiatrist in Chicago. Or no, excuse me, at the innkeeper show where
In Vermont.
in Vermont, where he rolls over and it's Suzanne Plachette. I just, when I was out there, there were a couple of people, and I told you I tried to get to meet them, but I never did. She was one, but I never had the opportunity because I didn't exactly travel in that circle. Peter Marshall would be somebody I would love to get on this show at some point to talk about Hollywood Squares and the ins and outs and all the other good stuff. I'm going to give you Suzanne Plachette's story. Since you adore her so much, I think you will appreciate this. Several of us, like 8 or 10 of us, were at dinner one night. Mm-hmm. And it was about 6 months into her marriage to Tom. And Tom was there, of course, and Susie, and I think Peter Marshall was there. Mostly it was a boys' night out plus Susie. When we had a boys' night out, she fit in because you could say anything in front of her. You could describe anything in front of her, and she didn't flinch. And they were asking, how's it going? And Suzanne, although her last name was Plachette, and it was her real name, was Jewish. And Tom was very, very, very not Jewish. And she said, well, we're having some problems. My kids don't understand why he reacts to nothing, and his kids don't understand why I react so much to everything. And we were having dinner one night in the house, and his kids were over, and they're saying, Suzanne, why are you reacting so large? And she starts snapping her fingers over her head like Tevye and starts to sing, 'cause it's a Jew thing, a Jew thing. And everybody in the restaurant just fell down because she did it only the way she would do it. This gorgeous woman, and just starts carrying on at the top of her lungs in the restaurant. Mm-hmm. But that's who she was. This is who I am. Deal with it. She was, if I could use what my father used to say to me when I was a kid, and I use it from time to time, if you don't like my apples, don't shake my tree.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You wrote a wonderful book about Lucille Ball, and everybody in the world. Now, I had the good fortune of knowing Lucy's son, Desi Arnaz. He lives in Boulder, Colorado, or Boulder City, Nevada. And he runs a drug rehabilitation facility there. And I got to learn a little bit about his mother, but not that much. The one thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand about her and is that she was not a comedian. From when she comes from behind that camera and is off, she's a totally whole 180 different person.
Well, people expected Lucille Ball to be Lucy Ricardo or Lucy Carmichael or Lucy Carter, whichever Lucy character she was playing. What people don't remember or didn't ever know is that she made over 70 films before she came to television. She was 40 when she came to TV. So she had this whole long career as a very serious actress in films, playing both tragedy and comedy. And what she was an incredible, brilliant, fearless actress who would do anything to get a laugh, but it didn't come from her. She had to have writers. There were people, Red Skelton, Jackie Gleason, Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, where if you said to them, go out and do 10 minutes, warm up the audience, they could do that. Mm-hmm. They had shtick. They could create characters. They could do silly nonsense things. They were indeed clowns. Miss Ball needed a good director and a good script. If she had them, she made them 900 times better and would do anything the script called for. But it had to be there. If you would read an I Love Lucy script, there would be pages of what they call black, stage directions in bold typeface in capital letters. Lucy, meaning the Lucy character. Lucy picks up the bottle of vitamin of Vegemin. She cocks her head to one side. She takes the spoon. She opens her eyes wide. She purses her lips. Now, she didn't follow it movement by movement. It was a scaffolding for her to follow. And in rehearsal, she would take that stuff and make it better and come up with her own things. But if you read a Here's Lucy script, Here's Lucy is 20 years later, completely different writers. Interior of Carter living room. There is, now this is true, this is an actual script I'm quoting from. There is a tank full of piranha fish, roller skates, stilts, and paper airplanes and glue. Lucy does 7 minutes of shtick. No, she doesn't, because you didn't tell her what to do with the props. And if you watch that particular episode, you see a wonderfully talented actress not quite sure knowing what to do because nobody told her. So what she is maybe the most brilliant comedy actress who ever lived. She couldn't say the things she did as Lucy Ricardo and have us believe them if she wasn't such a wonderful actress.
Yes.
You know, there were other sitcoms that came after I Love Lucy trying to imitate the show. My Little Margie, I Married Joan. And you see these women doing these really, really silly, unmotivated comedic things, and you don't believe for a minute that any real person would do that. You watch I Love Lucy, it is incredibly believable because Lucille Ball believes every word she's saying and every action she's taken. That is an incredible actress.
That's the standard of which she grew up in the business. People like Spencer Tracy, who always said, if you really are a good actor, it's flawless. You make it look easy. We're talking to Geoffrey Mark. He's the author of this incredible book, the biography of the legendary Ella Fitzgerald, which we're going to get to here real soon. We're talking about Lucille Ball. Geoffrey is a walking encyclopedia of show business knowledge. He's going to be back with us many times in the upcoming year because 1 hour just doesn't cover his life and some of the amazing things that he has done. He's also an Emmy Award-winning writer, and a Grammy Award nomination he has to his credit. Before we go on with the Ella Fitzgerald book, which I want to get to right away, again, you're listening to The Express, Gary Allen with you. She and Desi really created quite an arsenal, a studio out there called Desi Lou. And they were quite a force when they were both together.
They were, but I would like to correct you a little bit if you'll take a loving correction. Miss Ball's entire attention during the 6 seasons I Love Lucy was on I Love Lucy and being Lucy Ricardo. It was Mr. Arnaz who had the business acumen, because Mr. Arnaz came from royalty, almost literally. His family in Cuba were mayors and generals and doctors and senators, and he knew how to get the troops motivated and to do their best. He saw the opportunities once I Love Lucy became a success to do the same thing for other television shows.
Yeah.
Desi really created Desi Lou Studios. I think Ms. Ball was an unhappy recipient of a divorce forcing her to become a studio president. I don't think she ever really enjoyed that role. Mr. Arnaz was wonderful at it, and the success, not of I Love Lucy, but of the Desi Lou Studios, is 100% Mr. Arnaz and a couple of men who came after him. Because when he left and Ms. Ball became president of the studio, their coffers were low. And some men Ms. Ball hired, they didn't do comedies, but they created Star Trek, Mission Impossible, and Max. And, the billions with a B of money that have come in from Mission Impossible and Star Trek alone for a studio that was known for its comedies. So they had to sort of retool and rethink and pivot, reimagine Desi Lou as a dramatic studio. And they won. And as soon as they won, Ms. Ball sold the studio off for $8 million, and Paramount stock that immediately split, and she doubled her money. So good advice from good people, but the original success of the studio is due to Mr. Arnaz.
Well, also to Vivian Vance, and we'll do this real quick because I want to get on to Ella. Vivian Vance was much younger, not much, but she was younger than Lucy, and she had to play older.
Well, one more time, I'm going to have to, unfortunately, I do this only because if I don't, the fans out there are going to know the difference. And they'll say, Geoffrey, why didn't you tell him? Actually, through the years, different books claim different things.
Right.
When I Love Lucy went into production in August, late August of 1951, Lucille had just turned 40 and Miss Vance was 42. So they were the same age. And Miss Vance was playing much older.
Right.
For some reason, books written in the 70s placed Miss Ball being older because it made a good story, but they were the same age, within 2 years of each other.
Oh, okay.
And Vivian just had to play older because Miss Vance was a wonderful actress, a Broadway actress who knew how to create a character.
And the gentleman I know because I met Tim Constantine out in L.A. He's the soldier that got slapped in Patton. I know that the gentleman that played her husband on the show was not always the easiest individual in the world to get along with, according to what he said. Now, I don't know. But with that said, let's go ahead.
No, I'll be happy to tell a story if you'd like to hear it.
Sure.
We can get to Ella later. I'm here to make your friends out there happy with stories. The book is out there to buy. Buy it on Amazon. We've done the commercial. Let's talk fun stuff.
Okay.
The first day, the first filming of the first episode, Bill Frawley begged for the part. He was an alcoholic who was begging to be used because the studios weren't using him because of his drinking problem. And he got hired. I will make a long story shorter. So he was the first one to show up that day. Desi was already there because he was Desi of Desi Lou. Jess Oppenheimer, the producer, was there. The writers were there. Who had not shown up yet were Miss Ball and Miss Vance. Miss Vance shows up. Miss Vance had been hired last minute. They really had trouble casting Ethel Mertz because the people they wanted for it didn't want the part. They didn't pay enough, or they knew that Miss Ball was a tough taskmaster and didn't want to work with her. 3-camera show in front of a live audience had never been done. People were afraid of getting attached to a flop. And Miss Vance was doing a play that she'd done on Broadway on tour in La Jolla, California. And Desi and Jess Oppenheimer and the original director, Mark Daniels, went and saw her, and Desi hired her at intermission. She'd never met Miss Ball, and Miss Ball had never heard of her. Miss Vance comes to the first reading, and she sees Bill Frawley sitting there, and she says in a loudish voice, "Hey, Desi, who's the old coot?" And Desi says, "Honey, that's the man who's going to play your husband." And she said, "Husband? He could play my grandfather."
No.
That was it. That was it. For the rest of their lives, Bill Frawley detested Vivian Vance, was forced to work with her, and the writers were brilliant and realized that, A, they could both sing and dance. So they wrote that into the characters, and B, you have two actors who hate each other. Let's make Fred and Ethel an unhappily married couple and use that.
Yeah.
And that was very, very smart. So Miss Ball comes in and greets everybody. She makes her entrance and greets Vivian and said, "What are you here to read for?" And Miss Vance says, "Read for? I've signed a contract to play Ethel Mertz." And Miss Ball says, "You can't be Ethel Mertz. Forget it." And Vivian says, "Why? Why can't I be Ethel Mertz?" She said, "You're young. Your hair is red like mine. You're pretty. You have a nice figure." And Vivian was so smart. She said, "Lucille, tell me what Ethel Mertz looks like. She has bleached platinum blonde hair with dark roots. She doesn't wear a girdle. Her clothes don't fit her. She's frumpy. She doesn't wear, she's 45 or 50. She's unhappy in life. She's had a disastrous romantic life." Vivian said, "Give me a couple of weeks. I can't give you that this week. Give me a couple of weeks." So the first episode they shot, Vivian's hair is darker. It's the same color as Lucille's, dyed red hair. Vivian is thinner. What they did was Vivian stopped dieting and did not wear any foundation garments to keep her in. and they bought all of her clothing and her underwear a size too small. So no matter what shape her body was in, her clothes fit wrongly, and there was a paunch, and there was rolls of fat on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, as she aged, they didn't need to do that because she gained weight, as many of us do when we get older, and she hit menopause. But she went out of her way to frump herself up to please Lucille. And that's the first day of shooting. That's almost all of it is in place right from day one. All of the different relationships. Miss Ball greatly appreciated the lengths Vivian went to, and after 8 or 10 weeks realized what a wonderful actress she was, and relaxed around her, and the two became good friends.
Yeah, that's, there's a lot of stories in the business like that. I know one that I've been told that Andy Griffith and the woman who played Aunt Bee didn't exactly get along either.
Frances Bobbier didn't get along with anybody. Howie Morris, who played Ernest T. Bass on the show.
What a great actor he was. What a great actor, writer, you name it.
And director.
Yeah.
And a dear, dear friend of mine. I mean, we were very close friends. I spoke at his funeral. And he was directing Frances, as a director does. You got to hit your marks so that the camera gets you properly and you're in the light and you're in focus. And he's telling her where to stand, and she starts screaming at him, "I'm Frances Bobbier, and nobody tells me where to stand." And she walks off the set. That's how she was. She had this great chip on her shoulder. Andy told me before Frances died, he wrote her a letter, because she moved literally to North Carolina, right near where Mayberry would have been had it actually been a place, a real place. That's where she retired to. And she said, "Andy, I don't know why I was so difficult. I can't even tell you why I didn't like you, but I didn't. And I didn't like being on the show, and I resented everybody and everything." And she said, "I'm at the end of my life, and now I can't even tell you why. What a waste."
Yeah.
But she was difficult to everyone. She didn't like working with Ron Howard. And as the years went by, they gave more and more shows revolving around her to please her. I mean, she really became the co-star on the show after Don Knotts left.
Right.
But she just had this resentment, and nobody knows why.
Yeah.
She herself did not know why.
Some people go through life with a chip on their shoulders, and truly you really don't know why. It's like you take an instant dislike to somebody, and you're not quite sure why. You're listening to The Express. Gary Allen with you, along with my wonderful, wonderful guest and friend, Geoffrey Mark, who has written a number of great books, the Lucy Book, book on Ethel Merman, and this book on Ella Fitzgerald, the legendary Ella Fitzgerald, one of the greatest jazz singers that's ever lived. When you're getting ready to write a book, like you did with Ethel Merman, the Lucy Book, Ella, what's your motive? In other words, did you know 6 months before you started writing this is the book you wanted to do, or did it just pop into your head one day? And what's your R&D on this? What's your research and how your story develops as it moves along?
Good heavens, it's 18 questions.
Yes.
To answer the first one, I like to write about people who are the very best at what they do, which narrows the field quite a bit. That's the personal side of it. Whom do I admire? Who is the best at what they did? And then the other side of it is, what will the audience buy? For instance, I would love to write a wonderful book about Dinah Shore. Remarkable career in music and radio and television and film.
Yes.
No one will buy it. 18 people out there would buy a book about Dinah Shore. It is not financially feasible for me to spend years of my life writing a book that 18 people will buy.
Yeah.
So that narrows the field down quite a bit. Then Frank Sinatra, for instance. Well, there's 57 books written about Frank Sinatra.
True.
There's nothing new other than my personal interaction with him, which is in the Ella book. There's nothing new that I could bring to the table. I would just be one of a fishbowl of fish. So I want to be, what do I bring to the table that's special? So those are the two things. Who's the best, and what do I bring to this that's special and interesting and unique? The research is the research. If you're talking about a performer, You must hear every song they recorded if they're a singer, even things that weren't released. You have to see their films, see every television show, listen to every radio transcription, interview everybody who's still alive, personally and professionally, and then read the interviews of the people who have already passed away. I try never to have a conclusion before I start writing. Was
Right.
Ethel Merman a nice person or a not nice person? I didn't care until I did my research. Let them tell me if she was nice or not.
Mm-hmm.
The books I read about these people, because I wasn't the first person to write about any of these folks, I didn't enjoy them. I read books about Merman, and I thought, you know something? What you've told me about her personality, you could have told me in 3 paragraphs, and you keep repeating it over and over and over again. No human being is that shallow.
Mm-hmm.
No human being is that famous and isn't changed in some way. Nobody is that famous and meets all these other famous people, and there aren't interesting stories to tell. But I wasn't reading them. I was reading press agentry and what I thought was a lot of baloney and very, very bad investigation into her art, her work, and how it changed through the years. So I wanted to bring that out, and I wanted to tell the real story. My book on Ethel Merman is the only book that tells you, for instance, what really happened between her and Ernest Borgnine. They are legally married for 28 days. They live as husband and wife for 48 hours. What happened? None of the other books tell you. They don't even, in Merman's own autobiography, it's chapter 27, My Marriage to Ernest Borgnine. You turn the page, and it says chapter 28.
Really?
And she could go on, Merv Griffin and Johnny Carson and Mike Douglas in those days, and get a great laugh saying, I only write about the important things in my life, and she didn't think her marriage to Borgnine was important enough to write about. Now, it's a great gimmick, and it sold a lot of books for her, but it doesn't explain why the greatest performer who was ever on Broadway had a 48-hour marriage.
Yeah.
I explain it. That's the kind of thing I like. And I explain it without blaming either one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't make him a villain. I don't make her a villain. It's like, this is what happened. Draw your own conclusions.
Well, you got to get the book.
Yeah, I'm not there to make you love or hate anybody. I'm there to bring you information so you can draw your own conclusions. What I can do is when things have been written that are inaccurate, I can tell you, hey, you know what? Other books have said this wrong. This is how it was. When the Merman books came out, I made sure, special delivery, that Ernie Borgnine got a copy of it.
Mm-hmm.
He never, ever publicly commented on the book. That must tell you that I was right.
Yeah, and I'm not going to ask you what it was because I want people to go out there and buy the book as well as the Lucy book and the other books that you've written. We're talking to Geoffrey Mark. He's the author of this wonderful book on the life and times of one of the greatest jazz singers that ever lived, and that's Ella Fitzgerald. For those of you that are not old enough to remember Ella, if you think about Aretha Franklin, well, she was what Aretha Franklin brought to soul is what this young lady brought to jazz and music in general. Her voice was like silk. I believe Frank Sinatra said something similar to that, along with Bing Crosby and anybody that ever worked with her. I recommend you go out and get the book. It is an excellent read, full of jam-packed with pictures. And if you get the deluxe version, I guess you get 2 CDs with it as well. Where can they find the book, Geoffrey, in all the bookstores?
The easiest place to get it these days is go on Amazon.com and have it sent to your home.
Yeah.
Both the versions are there, the original version and the deluxe version has the 2 CDs. And we were so lucky to have that happen. Again, I'm the luckiest guy on the planet.
Yeah.
About a year and a half ago, I was doing a show at the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles with wonderful Patty Austin, giving a salute to Ella Fitzgerald. We were the celebrity guests. And attending was a man from Universal Music. And he came up to me after the show, and he said, are you aware that we own Decca? That was Ella's first record label for 20 years, and for whom I am Grammy nominated. I said, yes, I've worked for them. Oh, we also own Verve, Ella's next record label, for whom I have worked extensively, writing album notes. Oh, cool, it's all under one house. I said, yeah, we own Capitol Records, Ella's third label. And by the way, we distribute Pablo, Ella's last label. I said,
Yeah.
You got everything, and then the wheels clicked. You know, if it was a Bugs Bunny cartoon, a light bulb would have appeared over my head. And I said, wouldn't it be cool to include some of this music in the book? And months of negotiations happened.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 2 CDs in the book. One is 20 studio songs over 7 decades.
Wow.
Chosen by me and then sequenced exactly the way Ella would have sequenced them. And how do I know this? Because I used to sequence for her at the end of her life. And then 1 CD of live things from the late 40s to the late 70s, again, chosen by me and sequenced by me. And nobody ever thought to put something out like this that gives you the entire breadth from a teenage giggly girl to her very last album that was released in 1990, for which she got a Grammy. And we're really happy to bring it to the public. And to my surprise and delight, more of the more expensive version is being sold. People want the music too. So thank you, friends out there who understand how special this is. And a lucky guy to run into the right person to have a conversation that turns all of that into gold.
Yeah, I mean, it was luck that I got to meet you, and a friendship has begun. Do you look at people like Ella and Billie Holiday and Aretha and others in between and say, boy, they are just a gift? It comes from somewhere. It's like how I feel about Leonardo da Vinci and Beethoven and stuff like that, that they only come around once every so often, and they just they've got what it is. They've got it, and it's there, and you know it from the first time you see them.
It's something you're born with, and that applies to you, Gary, to me, Jeff, and to our friends who are listening. I don't mean to get spiritual on you, but
no, that's all right.
I believe in God, and I believe everyone is given talents, whether it's a talent to amuse or a talent to make wonderful food or a talent to make someone feel welcome in your home or a talent to give to charity or to help children. We all have talents. I think many of us get so caught up in the day-to-day life and the acquisition of money and things and dealing with the hardships life brings to everyone, that a lot of people either never realize what the gifts are or they're afraid of them and afraid of being different. So they live everyday lives. The people we're talking about, Ella, Lucille Ball, Billie Holiday, Frank Sinatra, said, no, I recognize what God did for me. It's now my responsibility to take the talent and do something with it. That's why the talent was given to me. Even if your talent is that you're great looking, or you're a woman with great big breasts, or a man who is incredibly endowed, it was given to you for a reason. Even if the reason is just to make other people happy. The people we're talking about, the best of the best, but even the people right under them, there's the cream of the crop, Sinatra and Ella maybe, and then everybody else. But there's wonderful Lena Horne, and there's wonderful Perry Como, and there's Lucille Ball, but there's wonderful Dick Van Dyke, and there's wonderful Mary Tyler Moore, and there's Carol Burnett. All of these people realized they had the gift, and we could go into all of their childhoods and all of their backgrounds and find all kinds of obstacles that might have kept them away from breaking through, and they said no. I could sit here and tell you stories about my childhood, and friends out there, we'd cry together. I didn't let it stop me. I'm on the air tonight with wonderful Gary Allen talking to all you guys out there because I didn't let anything stop me. And Gary's on the air because he doesn't let things stop him. Even when life gets tough, the express with Gary Allen is still there. It's what we do. So I think there's that something about all of us who break through in show business, whether you're a big star or a smaller celebrity, that just says, no, I am not being stopped. I am not going to be told how to live. I must take my talent and do the most I can with it.
Yeah.
And I think people who do that get to live extraordinary lives. You're lucky because you were given the talent. That's a gift. I did nothing to earn the talents I have.
Yeah.
Merman did nothing. Lucy did nothing. But what they could take a bow for is the hard work and the intestinal fortitude to take the talent and do something with it.
Yes.
If you're a singer, you have to risk people laughing at you or thinking you're not a good, but you got to open your mouth and sing. If you're a comedian, you have to risk not being funny and hearing crickets instead of laughter. If you're a cook, you have to risk people spitting your food out.
Yeah.
But you have to take the risk. And if you do and you're good at it, the next risk isn't as frightening. And pretty soon nothing really frightens you anymore. Now it's just the hard work. So, earthquakes frighten me. Being on the air does not frighten me. Being on the air is my happiest. Being with Gary Allen on the Express tonight is my happiest hour of the entire day. I love doing this.
Well, it's the same as when I used to do a lot of corporate shows out there as a comic and stuff. Or I would be doing game shows for a corporation that I used to do some work for. Or I'm behind the microphone here tonight. This is where I live. It's not all of who I am, but it is where I live. It's the only thing God gave me the ability to do because I was not the greatest stand-up comic. I want to go back to one story real quick, and then I have another one about Ella.
We'll go anywhere you want, Gary.
We're talking to Geoffrey Mark. He's the author of this wonderful book that I suggest everybody pick up, The Wonderful Life, the biography of the legendary Ella Fitzgerald. And I've got a story to tell about her in just a couple of minutes. But you were talking earlier about Steve Allen. There were two MCs at the Improv. One was myself and Howard Allen, both Allens. Steve Allen used to come in there every once in a great while, and he would bring Jane. And when he went in one night, Bud Friedman is sitting at a table. He sees Steve come in, and he comes down and he greets him, and he goes, and Steve Allen goes, "Hey, are my two sons here tonight?" Meaning both Howard and myself. And he go, "No, one of them is here, the other one is not." Or, "Yes, they're both here." And I found him to be warm and so exciting. He did a series of shows that I really love. Unfortunately, they're not out there. I wish they were. They're in colleges and stuff. And that's the Meeting of the Minds, which I thought was a fascinating show all the way around.
Actually, some of the episodes of Meetings of the Minds can be bought on DVD now. Bill, his son, put them out a few years ago. Not the whole series, but what we're talking about is Steve Allen created this wonderful idea. What if we brought in, if we could, twitch our nose like Samantha from Bewitched and make people appear? Let's bring in the greatest minds of history, throw a topic at them, and let them bandy it around the table. So he hired wonderful actors to play the parts of Socrates and the Queen of the Nile and Michelangelo and Benedict Arnold, Benjamin Franklin. Right. And Steve wrote the scripts. He did the research, pulled words out of what these people had written publicly, which is incredible research for him to do, and put together these brilliant hours. The only thing people laughed at was that every woman in the world in history was Jane Meadows, because he used Jane to play everything.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, folks, that it wasn't just a one-on-one thing. He would have like Leonardo da Vinci, Abraham Lincoln, and General Eisenhower sitting there talking about a subject matter. People who would not even have known each other. They were either dead already by hundreds of years, and it was just a fascinating show. Real quick, because we got about 4 or 5 minutes left here in the program, and the hour has gone by fast. That's why Geoffrey is going to be back. I guarantee it, because I'm going to talk to him in a little bit. When I was a little boy, I got to see Ella Fitzgerald on TV with this huge choir behind her. And my whole family and I, we were sitting around watching television. We had just gotten a color TV. That's how long ago it was. And she was there with the choir, and this was the first time in my life I had ever heard "Oh Happy Days." And when I was done with that, I got up with tears in my eyes, and I went into my room, and I laid on my bed, and I had the light on, and I just looked at the ceiling, and I just stood there with the water coming out of my eyes. And my mother came in to say, "What is wrong?" And even my father was crying, although he pretended to say it was just a bug in his eye or something. And I and my sisters were emotional about it. I'd never heard that song before. And I never heard anybody else do that song. And I've often said that if I could afford it when I die, I want that song sung at my funeral, which is going to be a quick funeral. But I had never heard that before.
I hope it makes you happy to know that I have that on video. What you're referring to is the Tom Jones show. Ella had gone to England and done the show, and it was Christmas time, and she wanted to do not just a Christmas song, but a spiritual.
Yeah.
And they brought in a Welsh choir behind her of men, huge, as you were describing, and it is, she was not well at the time, but something inside of her came out, and the voice, it wasn't just a voice, the look on her face, the look on everybody else's face looking at her as she was singing this. I completely understand why you got choked up, because I did too the first time I saw it.
I just lost it, and I've never heard it since. It's one of my favorite all-time gospel songs, and I was so grateful to have seen it.
Well, it's not lost to time, and it's not lost to you. So we will have that in your life soon.
I hope so. And Geoffrey, the hour has gone by, and with all the people you know, I guarantee you are going to be back, as I've said a million times. Get this book, folks. We didn't really talk about it very much, but this book is jam-packed with so much information about the life of one of the great entertainers of any lifetime, the biography of the legendary Ella Fitzgerald, her life from when she was born in 1917 until she passed away. It is a terrific read. It's a well-written book. It is written by a gentleman who is something else again. I will tell you, Geoffrey Mark, who is the encyclopedia of show business knowledge. And I thank you so much, sir, for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here on The Express. You will be back, and I will call you after the show this evening. But thank you again for joining us and giving us your insights into a lot of different people this evening in the show business community.
I will be on, Gary, with us and our friends out there as often as you will have me.
Well, you better count on it, and I'll hold you to it, too. And this has been an extraordinary week for me. It's had some ups and downs, and Jeff was there for me a little bit along with some of my other friends, and I'm not going to get into it too much. But go and get this book, or get the Lucy book, get the Ethel Merman book, The Biggest Star on Broadway, also a family affair cookbook, which I'm sure is exciting. But get this book on the biography of Ella Fitzgerald, the legend Ella Fitzgerald, the greatest jazz singer that ever was. And boy, could she scat with Mel Torme.
Absolutely.
She could really scat. So thank you all very much for taking the time out of your day to join us here on The Express. We'll be back next week with another show. And I thank you all so much for taking the time. Gary Allen here on The Express, along with my guest, Geoffrey Mark. Until next time, please take care of yourselves and each other.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.